Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let your mind drift back to a time before time when the earth was still young and the skies were ruled by gods of unimaginable power. In this soft and sacred story, we'll journey into the heart of Aztec mythology to uncover how the gods created and destroyed four entire worlds before finally giving birth to the fifth and final sun, the one we live under now. A tale of sacrifice, rivalry, and cosmic renewal awaits you. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? I'd love to know where this story is reaching you. Let the story begin. Before the world had form, before the sun had ever risen, there was only silence, a stunt so deep and vast that it swallowed all thought. There was no sky, no earth, no time, only an eternal darkness stretching endlessly in every direction, like a sleeping ocean without wind, without waves. From this cosmic stillness emerged the first divine force, not one but two beings in perfect unity, Ometecutli and Omekehuatl, the Lord and Lady of duality. They were not male or female, but both, creators of opposites, of balance, of everything that would come. They did not walk or speak or even think as we do. Their essence simply was infinite, eternal, and unknowable. Together they existed at the very top of the 13 heavens, in a sacred realm known as Omeakan, the place of duality. There, outside of time, they dreamed the universe into being, and from the mystery of their union came 4 children, 4 gods, each with their own powers, temperaments, and destinies. The first was Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, god of night, sorcery, conflict, and hidden truths. He was the shadow that danced on the edge of the fire, the voice that whispered from the obsidian mirror. He held a jaguar's strength and a trickster's cunning. With one foot in darkness and the other in divine pride, he was destined to shape and test the world. The second was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, god of wind, wisdom, and creation. He represented breath, movement, and renewal. He was the bringer of knowledge, the patron of learning, the architect of harmony. Where Tezcatlipoca challenged, Quetzalcoatl inspired. But even the wisest of gods can be drawn into rivalry. The third was Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird of the south, the warrior son, born of fire and destined for battle. He would come to lead armies and demand sacrifice to keep the world alive, but in these early days he was only a spark, a glimmer of power waiting to be kindled. And the fourth was Zoiptotec, the flayed one, god of agriculture, renewal, and sacred suffering. He wore the skin of death to bring the fruits of life. His was the rhythm of decay and rebirth, of seed and harvest, of flesh, given so that others may live. These 4 brothers would shape the cosmos together and destroy it again and again, but not yet. For now they looked out into the void and saw nothing. There was no light, no time, no ground beneath their feet or sky above their heads, only the trembling sense that something could be, if they dared to create it. So the gods began to stir the void. They reached into the nothingness and shaped the sky and the earth, raising the heavens like a great dome, stretching the land beneath like a blanket. They created mountains, rivers, and seas. They crafted stars and constellations, placing them carefully into the inky fabric of the night. But something was missing. Without the sun, all their creation was cloaked in shadow. Time itself stood still, days did not pass, and life could not begin. And so the gods knew, to truly bring the world to life, they would need a sun, a source of light, warmth, and movement. But to create such a sun, to ignite the fire that would give life to all things, would not be simple. It would require sacrifice. A god would have to give themselves completely to the flames. Thus began the long and painful story of the suns, not just 1 but 5, each born from the will of the gods, each destined to rise, rule, and eventually fall. The story of the 5th world had not yet begun, but the seeds were planted in darkness, in silence, in the breath of gods who dream not for themselves, but for the worlds yet to come. And so, from the timeless realm of Omeoken, the divine clock began to tick, ever so slowly. The stillness cracked, the void began to shimmer, and the stage for creation and destruction was set. In the vast silence that followed the shaping of the heavens and the earth, the gods turned to one another and knew what must come next. They had moulded the land, stretched the sky, poured the rivers, and planted the seeds of mountains. But all of it remained still, cold, lifeless. There was no heartbeat to the world, no rhythm, no day or night. Without a sun, the sky was a dome of blackness, pierced only by faint stars. It was beautiful, but hollow, and so the gods gathered to decide who among them would take the greatest step, who would become the first sun and bring light and time into the world. Tezcatlipoca stepped forward. He was the boldest, the most proud. His obsidian mirror smoked with mystery. His jaguar eyes gleamed with fire. He did not ask permission. He declared his right. "I shall become the sun," he said, and with no further hesitation he rose into the sky. The earth gasped as it saw its first dawn. Tezcatlipoca's light was not gentle. It was powerful and sharp, like a blade of fire tearing through the night. Shadows fled, trees awakened, the seas shimmered under the sudden brilliance. And with this first sunrise the world began. Under Tezcatlipoca's reign, the first humans emerged. But they were not like us. They were giants, great beings, tall as trees, strong as rivers. They roamed the land, feasting on acorns, building great fires, speaking in booming voices that echoed across mountains. The world belonged to them, and for a time they thrived beneath the watchful eye of their sun. But Tezcatlipoca, god of shadow and conflict, could not rule without challenge. His brother Quetzalcoatl watched him with a quiet storm in his heart. Jealousy, rivalry, and ancient tension stirred between them. Quetzalcoatl, though wise and gentle by nature, could not bear to see his brother basking in glory while he stood in the shadows. In the heavens, words were exchanged. Bitter glances passed like thunderclouds. The balance between the brothers cracked, and one day it broke. Quetzalcoatl took action. He struck Tezcatlipoca from the sky, hurling him to the earth with a force so great that mountains trembled and oceans churned. The first sun fell, the world was plunged into darkness once again. But that was not the end of Tezcatlipoca's wrath. As he hit the earth, Tezcatlipoca rose in anger, no longer a radiant god of light, but a raging jaguar. His form shifted into that of a colossal beast, black as midnight, with golden eyes and teeth like obsidian daggers. He roared through the land, and with each breath he devoured the giants that had walked beneath his sun. One by one the towering humans were hunted and torn apart, their bones scattered across the wilderness. The world trembled under the fury of the jaguar god. The forest echoed with the cries of those who fled, but none could escape. Tezcatlipoca, betrayed and humiliated, took his vengeance not on his brother, but on the world they had created together. By the time his rage subsided, the first world had been reduced to ruin. The light was gone, the giants were extinct. The earth lay quiet, once again cloaked in shadow. The gods looked down and saw the silence they had once known return, not as peace, but as mourning. The first sun was gone, but not all hope was lost. One god had fallen, but another stood ready to rise. Creation, the gods realized, could never be permanent. It must always be earned through courage, through sacrifice, and through endless cycles of death and rebirth. The sun would rise again, but never the same way twice. Once again the world lay in darkness. The great fire that had once ruled the sky had been extinguished. The earth was wounded from the jaguar's rage. The mountains stood scorched and silent. The rivers slowed as if in grief. No giants walked the land any more. Their voices had vanished, and only the sighing of wind through empty valleys remained. The gods gathered high in the heavens, gazed down upon this hollowed creation, and felt the weight of their failure. But they were not finished. There was no room for despair among the gods, only the will to begin again. This time it was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who stepped forward. He had struck down his brother Tezcatlipoca, and now he felt the burden of consequence. But more than guilt, he felt a deep and noble determination. He would take responsibility. He would bring light back into the world. He would become the next sun, not a sun of destruction, but of breath and motion, of harmony and wit. The other gods consented, and Quetzalcoatl rose into the sky, unfolding his serpentine wings. The heavens trembled as his light broke through the clouds. The second sun was born, radiant, golden, and filled with grace. Under his gentle warmth, the world began to breathe again. This time the humans were made smaller, no longer towering giants, but beings more like us, fragile, clever, with hands that could build and hearts that could wonder. They walked upright, lived in forests and by the banks of rivers. They danced and sang and told stories around the firelight. Their lives were not grand, but they were meaningful. They revered the gods, especially the sun, for it brought life each day. But even in this new age, peace could not last forever. High above, Tezcatlipoca brooded, still licking the wounds of his fall, still carrying the bitterness of being cast down by his own brother. He watched the world under Quetzalcoatl's rule, and he grew restless. He saw the small, joyful people beneath the second sun. He saw them laughing, singing, building small homes, making offerings to Quetzalcoatl, and he could not bear it. He whispered to the wind, he cast illusions in the sky. He waited patiently, slowly poisoning the balance. Then, when the moment was right, Tezcatlipoca struck. He transformed the peaceful humans into monkeys, wild, chattering, thoughtless creatures. Their upright posture bent, their hands became claws, their songs turned into howls. They scrambled through the trees, forgetting the gods, forgetting even their own names. Quetzalcoatl looked down and wept. His creation had been twisted, his efforts mocked, his son dishonoured. In sorrow and fury he unleashed his own vengeance, not upon Tezcatlipoca directly, but upon the world. He summoned a mighty wind, a divine hurricane. The air itself rose up and screamed through the valleys. Trees were ripped from the ground, mountains groaned, the seas curled into monstrous waves. The wind carried everything away, the monkeys, the forests, the cities, the laughter, the tears. All of it swept into the sky and scattered like leaves in a storm. The second world was erased. The sun flickered in the heavens, and then, like a breath being drawn back into the chest of a sleeping god, it vanished. Once more darkness returned. The stars blinked into visibility. The land lay in ruins. The monkeys had been taken by the wind, and the earth was clean but empty. The gods sat in silence, their hearts heavy. They had tried twice to give the world a sun, and twice it had ended in destruction. Pride, vengeance, rivalry, these had stained their creation, but still, the urge to create burned in them like embers waiting to be stoked. For they were gods, and gods, like the stars, do not give up easily. Darkness embraced the world once more. A silence deeper than sleep settled over the land. The mountains stood like ancient sentinels, unmoving and bare. The rivers had stilled, their courses dry. The skies, once lit by the brilliance of the feathered serpent, now stretched endlessly, dark and hollow, as though grieving what had been lost. But among the gods there was no rest. The cycle had to continue. Life could not end in wind and ruin. The third attempt had to be made. This time the gods turned to Tlaloc, the god of rain and water, lord of storms and fertility. Where the first sun had brought strength and dominance, and the second had brought wisdom and motion, this new age would be guided by water, the lifeblood of the earth. Tlaloc stepped forward, his body shimmering with moisture, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. He promised a world where plants would flourish, where crops would rise tall beneath his nourishing rains, where humanity would thrive under his generous skies. The gods agreed, and so the third sun rose, a sun of rain, renewal, and plenty. Under Tlaloc's watchful gaze, a new race of humans was born. These were people who understood the patterns of water. They lived near lakes and rivers, building small communities in fertile valleys. They learned to plant seeds, to gather fruits, to give thanks to the sky for every drop that fell. They honoured Tlaloc with offerings of corn and flowers, with prayers for gentle rains and protection from drought. And for a time the world was green and joyful, but Tlaloc, while generous, was not without fury. The people began to forget that water, like all divine forces, must be respected. They grew arrogant, demanding more rain when the fields were dry, blaming the god when the skies withheld. Their gratitude faded into complaint, their offerings grew lazy, and their reverence turned to impatience. Some even mocked the god of rain, saying, "He gives too little, he gives too much. Why must we depend on a moody sky for our lives?" Their voices rose with ungratefulness, echoing upward into the heavens. Tlaloc heard every word. His eyes, once soft like the mist, hardened like ice. His heart, once full of dew and mercy, began to boil with anger. He had given them rivers, and they had cursed them. He had sent rain, and they had mocked him. And so he would show them the true power of water, not as life, but as fire. For Tlaloc was not only the bringer of rain, he was the god of storms, lightning, and divine wrath. He could call down not only drops of water, but flaming stones and burning torrents, and when his fury erupted, it did not come as gentle rain. It came as fire. One day the skies darkened not with clouds, but with something more terrible, a storm of burning rain. Fiery embers fell from the sky like a rain of stars, each one hissing and smoking as it struck the ground. The forests ignited, the rivers boiled, the very soil cracked and bled steam. Humans ran in terror, their cries swallowed by the roar of flame. The once fertile valleys were turned into fields of ash. It was not a fire made by mortals, it was divine fire, sacred and merciless. The world burned for days, for nights, for what seemed like a lifetime. And when at last the storm passed and the final ember died, the third sun dimmed. It flickered, then vanished, as though it too had been scorched from the sky. The gods looked down and saw a world in ruin. Smoke curled from the charred remains of villages. Rivers were dry. Trees were skeletons of soot. There was no song, no prayer, no breath left upon the wind. The third world had ended, not with silence, but with fire. The gods turned away from the smouldering earth, grieving yet again. They had watched 3 suns rise and 3 worlds fall. Each had been given a chance to thrive, each had ended in catastrophe. They wondered, were humans destined to always fail? Were they too fragile, too proud, too short-sighted to live in harmony with the divine? But still, the cycle whispered, begin again. For even in ash seeds wait to grow. The scorched earth lay silent. Ash drifted through the air like forgotten prayers. The rivers, once swollen with life, had dried into cracked scars across the land. The forests had been reduced to charred bones, blackened trunks rising like mournful arms into a lifeless sky. The third sun, born of rain and fury, had passed into memory. The gods once again gathered in the stillness, burdened by their failures, yet compelled by their divine duty to begin anew. They had watched giants fall, monkeys fly, and fire consume what was meant to flourish. Each attempt had ended in ruin, and yet they could not abandon the world. Creation was not a single act, but a cycle, and the time for the fourth world had come. This time it was Chalchi-Otlikwe who stepped forward. She was the goddess of rivers, lakes, and flowing waters. Her name meant she of the jade skirt, and she shimmered with gentle power and radiance serene and eternal. Where Tlaloc had brought storms, she offered calm. Where his reign had seared the land in wrath, hers promised healing. She was the bringer of love, fertility, and cleansing waters. Her tears could revive the fields. Her presence was felt in every spring and every lake that mirrored the sky. The gods looked to her with hope. Perhaps a gentler hand could guide creation toward peace. Perhaps the world this time would survive. And so, under the guidance of Chalchiuhtlicue, the fourth sun rose, soft and silver, glowing like the reflection of the moon on a still lake. It cast a light that soothed rather than scorched, that caressed rather than commanded. Beneath this gentle sun, a new generation of humans was born. They were small, delicate, and quiet. They built their homes near water, understanding its sacred importance. They sang songs of gratitude to the rivers and made offerings to the lakes. They harvested reeds, fished respectfully, and lived in harmony with the flowing world around them. They understood that water could give and take, and they treated it with reverence. For a while, this fourth world flourished. The rains were steady and kind, the crops grew tall, and the animals thrived. Chalchiuhtlicue watched over it all with the deep, quiet love of a mother, watching her children grow. Her heart swelled with tenderness. She believed this world would finally endure. But the other gods, perhaps those still stung by previous failures, or perhaps guided by hidden rivalries, began to murmur. They whispered that Chalchiuhtlicue's heart was too soft, that her love made her vulnerable. Some even claimed she ruled not from strength but from sentiment. They questioned her power behind closed lips and side glances. Chalchiuhtlicue heard their doubts, and worse, she felt something deeper: betrayal. The world she had nurtured, the humans she had protected, even the gods she called kin, none of them fully trusted her. They saw her tears as weakness. They mistook her compassion for fragility, and so her heart broke. But a goddess's grief is not like a human's. It does not come in silence or sobs. It comes in floods. Chalchiuhtlicue began to weep, not from anger, but from sorrow so profound it could not be contained. Her tears fell upon the earth, not as drops, but as torrents. Lakes swelled. Rivers burst their banks. The oceans rose to the sky. What began as a soft rain became an endless storm, a downpour that washed across mountains, valleys, forests, and fields. The humans, small and unprepared, could not flee fast enough. They clung to trees and rooftops as the waters swallowed the earth. The great flood rose higher and higher, drowning cities, swallowing temples, erasing everything that had been built in her name. It is said that the flood did not only destroy, but transformed. Some humans were turned into fish to survive in the new world of water. Others were carried into caves to sleep until a new sun rose. The rest became whispers in the current, forgotten names in the endless tide. The fourth sun vanished beneath the waves, and the world was returned to darkness, to silence, to deep and mournful stillness. Chalchiuhtlicue retreated from the world. Her love had been true, her sorrow honest, but even the purest heart when broken can become a force of destruction. The flood she unleashed was not an act of vengeance, but a cry that reshaped the world, a cry that reminded even the gods that emotions too are sacred and powerful, capable of both giving life and taking it away. The gods watched the water recede slowly over time. When it did, it left behind a world cleansed, but empty. A vast stage cleared once more, awaiting the next act in the eternal play of creation. They had tried 4 times, they had failed 4 times, but the gods knew this cycle would not end here, and deep within the silence left by the flood, the earth whispered a simple truth of begin again. The world was hushed beneath the weight of water and memory. All that had once lived now slept beneath the waves. The mountains had become islands, the forests were stripped, the rivers swallowed by oceans that stretched from horizon to horizon. The air smelled of salt and sorrow. The skies had dimmed to a soft grey, and there was no sun, only the reflection of emptiness on the surface of the flooded earth. 4 times the gods had created the world. 4 times it had ended. Each destruction had come in a different form: jaguar, wind, fire, flood, and each had left behind the same truth: no world is eternal. Even gods must begin again. In the heavens the gods sat in solemn council. Their eyes had grown weary from watching the creations fall. Their hearts were heavy, not with despair, but with longing. Despite all the ruin, something inside them still ached to try again, to rise once more, to give the world one last chance, but this time they knew something greater would be required, something more profound than power, more sacred than creation itself. They needed sacrifice, and not just any sacrifice. This time it could not be a gift of blood or a ritual, or even the destruction of another world. This time a god would have to give everything: body, spirit, name, and light. A god would have to leap into fire and become the sun. And so the gods descended to the ancient and sacred valley of Teotihuacan. This was the place of beginnings, the place where the sky met the earth. It was a city not built by men, but by time and divine will. The pyramids had not yet been shaped into stone, but the space hummed with power, an axis where the world could be reset. It was here, in the heart of the land, that the gods gathered to decide the fate of all things. They built a great bonfire, the sacred fire of renewal, and its flames reached toward the stars like golden fingers. The gods circled it in silence. Each flame was a question, each spark a test. Who among them would step forward? Who would offer themselves to become the 5th sun? At last 2 gods were chosen. The first was Tecuichiztecatl, the proud and radiant one. He was wealthy, powerful, adorned in brilliant feathers and shining gold. His name meant the Lord of Snails, and he moved slowly but always with intention. He was handsome and confident, and he believed without question that he was destined to be the next sun. The second was Nanahuatzin, the humble and diseased god. His skin was blistered and scarred, his clothes simple and worn. He was quiet, modest, overlooked by many. He did not walk with pride but with reverence, knowing he was small in the eyes of the divine. Yet he possessed a strength the others did not see, a strength of heart, of spirit, of stillness. The fire crackled. The time had come. Tecuichiztecatl stepped forward. He was the obvious choice in the eyes of many. He bowed before the fire, recited his praises, and prepared to enter the flames. But as he neared the fire, its heat reached out to him, searing, alive, unforgiving. He hesitated. He looked into the heart of the flames and saw his own reflection consumed. His courage faltered. He stepped back, once, twice. 4 times he tried to leap into the fire. 4 times he failed. The gods watched in silence. The fire roared. The moment grew heavy. Then, without a word, Nanahuatzin rose. He did not speak. He did not boast. He simply bowed before the fire, whispered a prayer, and threw himself into the flames. The fire welcomed him. It rose up around him like a golden wave, consuming his fragile body, licking away the blisters, the scars, the flesh. He burned not with agony but with transcendence, and from the heart of the blaze a light erupted, so pure, so bright that even the stars blinked. Nanahuatzin became the sun, the 5th sun. His light spread across the sky, casting warmth on the flooded world, calling life to rise from the mud and ash. The waters began to recede. The air shimmered with hope. Plants awakened. Birds sang again. Humanity, fragile, flawed, and beautiful, would be born anew. But something else stirred. Ashamed of his hesitation, Tecuichiztecatl leapt into the fire after Nanahuatzin. He burned too, but the fire did not greet him the same way. His light rose as well, but it was pale, cold, and overshadowed. The gods looked upon him and saw pride, not sacrifice. To mark his shame, one of the gods threw a rabbit at his face, and thus Tekushiztecatl became the moon. You can still see the rabbit's imprint there today in the quiet face of the moon, forever chasing the sun across the sky, forever reminded of what might have been. The sun and moon now hung in the heavens, but something was wrong. Though Nanahuatzin shone with divine brilliance, he did not move. He simply hung in place, motionless, as though waiting. The gods realized the final truth. For the sun to move across the sky, for time to flow, for the fifth world to truly live, they themselves would have to sacrifice. It was not enough to watch. And so one by one, the gods offered their own blood, their own hearts, their divine energy to the sky. With each offering, the sun stirred. With each sacrifice, it began to move, slowly at first, then with purpose across the sky. The cycle of day and night was born. The fifth world had begun. But it came with a sacred warning. As long as humans remember to honor the gods through sacrifice, whether in blood, in prayer, or in gratitude, the sun will rise, the world will live. But if they forget, if they become proud or cruel or blind to the sacred, then even this sun, this final golden sun, will fall. As the fire still burned in the sacred heart of Teotihuacan, its flames twisting upward like golden serpents reaching for the stars, the gathered gods felt the weight of destiny settle heavily upon them. The fifth sun had not yet risen. The heavens waited, breathless. All of creation lingered in a single moment, suspended like dew on the edge of a leaf, ready to fall, ready to bloom. Two gods stood at the edge of the fire. On one side stood Tekushiztecatl, proud and luminous. His garments shimmered with jade and gold, his chest adorned with pearls and feathers from the sacred Quetzal. He radiated self-assurance, his voice smooth like wind over obsidian. He had long believed that he, above all others, was worthy of becoming the new sun. His riches, his beauty, his influence, surely the heavens would reflect his glory. On the other side stood Nanahuatzin, the humble god. His body was covered in sores, his skin marked by illness and hardship. His tunic was orfèvre and plain, stitched by hand and faded by time. While Tekushiztecatl was bathed in luxury, Nanahuatzin was wrapped in quiet dignity, a god whose power lay not in appearance but in the silent strength of his heart. The gods prepared them for the ritual. Each was placed in solitude, given time to reflect, to meditate, to prepare. They were expected to fast and perform acts of penance, to purify their bodies and souls. Tekushiztecatl offered coral, turquoise, and fragrant incense. He adorned the altars with precious jewels. His face was proud, but beneath it his heart was restless. He feared the flames. He feared failure. Nanahuatzin, meanwhile, performed his penance in silence. He bled himself with cactus thorns. He offered not gold, but maguey spines, reeds, and his own breath. He bowed deeply again and again, offering humility instead of splendor. He asked for nothing, demanded nothing. In his heart he held only a single quiet prayer, that the world might live. When the time came, the gods encircled the sacred fire. The wind died, the stars dimmed. The flames danced higher than ever before, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the divine. A god called out, "It is time, let the first of you step forward." All eyes turned to Tekushiztecatl. He rose slowly, every step measured, as though the fire itself watched with judgment. He walked toward the blaze, chest lifted high, adorned in glory. But as he neared the flames, the heat became unbearable. The fire whispered to him, not with words, but with pure presence. It told him, to enter is to become nothing. To leap is to lose everything you have ever known. Your pride, your face, your name. And Tekushiztecatl hesitated. He stopped just short of the fire. He looked into its depths and saw himself dissolving, melting into light and ash. Fear clenched his heart. He stepped back. A murmur rippled through the gods. Again he approached, trembling this time, and again he faltered. 4 times he stepped toward the flames. 4 times he turned away. His face, once radiant, was now pale with shame, and then Nanahuatzin stepped forward. He said nothing. He did not wait to be called. He simply bowed his head, whispered his thanks to the gods, and walked toward the fire. His steps were steady, unwavering. He did not pause. He did not flinch. The flames wrapped around him like a blanket, and in an instant he vanished. Consumed, transformed. The fire erupted. A pillar of light surged into the sky, and the heavens themselves opened. The sun was born. Nanahuatzin, the humble god, became the 5th sun, a blazing orb of golden fire, radiant and eternal. His light swept across the earth, warming the stones, waking the seeds, calling life from darkness. The world, once drowned and broken, stirred once more. Birds rose into the morning air, rivers shimmered, trees stretched their branches. Humanity would be born again. Tekuchizdakal, witnessing this, was overcome with shame. He who had dressed himself in jewels now felt stripped and hollow. His pride had become a burden. In desperation he ran to the fire and hurled himself into the flames. He too was consumed, but the fire had already chosen. His light rose in the sky, pale and soft, chasing after the sun but never overeating it. The gods looked upon his face and saw no humility, only the echo of arrogance. To mark him forever, one of the gods reached down and seized a rabbit, a simple, quiet creature, and cast it at Tekuchizdakatl's face. The mark of the rabbit dimmed his light, and that is why the moon bears the image of a rabbit to this day. Tekuchizdakatl became the moon, bright but colder than the sun, majestic but forever second. He would follow Nanahuatzin across the sky for all eternity, a quiet reminder that light born of pride can never shine as purely as light born of sacrifice. Thus, in the fire of Teotihuacan, the sky gained both sun and moon. But the 5th sun, the one that warms us now, that lights our days, rose not from grandeur, but from humility, not from gold, but from ash, not from pride, but from love so deep it was willing to give itself completely. That is the sun that still rises each morning, and that is the lesson the gods left in the sky. The sky had changed forever. Where once there had been only endless darkness, now 2 celestial bodies danced across the heavens, one bold and golden, the other soft and silver. The sun, born of humility and sacrifice, rose in the east each day with brilliance and warmth, breathing life into the world below, and trailing behind it pale and cool came the moon, a reflection not only of light, but of a sorrowful lesson, one written in shame and second chances. But this balance, like all things divine, was not created without pain. When Nanahuatzin threw himself into the sacred fire of Teotihuacan, he did so without hesitation. His sacrifice had been pure. He had asked for nothing in return. As the flames consumed his flesh, his soul transformed, not into ash, but into radiance. He became the sun not just in body, but in spirit, a divine force that gives without ceasing, whose very existence sustains all life. The gods watched as the sky blazed with his light. His golden rays spread across the landscape, touching mountain tops, waking oceans, stretching fingers of fire into forests and plains. The new world responded with awe. Flowers opened, winds carried seeds, clouds moved in rhythm with his breath. The animals stirred from ancient slumber, and even the rocks seemed to glow under his gaze. But while the sun rose with joy, Tekuchizdakatl watched from the shadows. He had been proud, too proud, certain that he would be the one to rise, certain that his wealth, beauty, and power made him the obvious choice. But when the fire called, he had paused. He had doubted, and doubt, in the world of gods, carries a heavy price. Unable to bear the shame of watching Nanahuatzin succeed where he had failed, Tekuchizdakatl had finally leapt into the flames after him. His body burned, His light rose. For a moment, there were 2 suns in the sky, blazing with equal fire. The gods were alarmed. 2 suns. The world could not endure such brilliance. The heat would scorch the land. The balance would break. There must be only 1 sun to rule the day. So the gods made a judgment. They reached into the heavens and seized a rabbit, an unassuming creature of the earth, gentle, timid, overlooked. One god took the rabbit by its ears and hurled it with divine force straight at Tekuchistecatl's face. The light of his newly formed sun dimmed in an instant. His brightness faded, his fire cooled, and there, on his surface, appeared the faint outline of the rabbit's body, ears, back and tail. A mark to remind all who looked upon him that his light had not been earned by sacrifice but taken in desperation. That the moon, though lovely, was born not from courage but from pride and from regret. From that moment on, Tekuchistecatl no longer ruled the day. Instead, he became the moon, the guardian of the night. He followed Nanahuatzin through the sky, always behind, always watching, always remembering. His face glowed softly, not with the strength of the sun, but with borrowed light, a gentle echo of the greatness he had once hoped to claim. And yet, in that silver glow, something beautiful was born. The people of the New World looked up at night and saw not just darkness, but the moon's pale lantern hanging above them. It became a symbol of mystery, of rhythm, of time itself. It lit the paths of travellers. It watched over lovers and dreamers. It whispered to the tides, stirred the hearts of poets, and guided the souls of the dead. The rabbit in the moon became a story passed from mother to child, generation to generation, a tale of ambition, humility, failure and forgiveness, a tale that lived in the very sky. But even more than a lesson, the moon became a companion, for in every life, even those filled with light, there are nights, and in every night, even the darkest, there is a glow. So the sun and the moon began their eternal dance, one born of fire, the other of reflection, one lighting the way by day, the other offering peace by night. Together they marked the passage of time. They shaped calendars, governed ceremonies, inspired myths and rituals. Their movements formed the heartbeat of the cosmos. And though Tekuchistecatl had failed in pride, his presence in the sky became a quiet redemption. A reminder that even broken ambition can be turned to beauty, that even those who fall short can still serve the world, can still be seen, can still offer light. So when you look to the sky and see the moon rising, remember the God who was not chosen, but who rose anyway. And if you look closely in the pale light of night, you may still see the outline of the rabbit, leaping gently across the face of the moon, whispering the truth of the fifth world to all who are willing to listen. The sun had risen. Its golden light bathed the world in warmth and motion, awakening forests, stirring oceans, and breathing life back into the valleys and mountains that had once been drowned, burned, shattered and forgotten. The fifth sun, born from Nanahuatzin's selfless leap into the sacred fire, now hung in the sky like a heart of flame, radiant, steady, eternal. It was everything the gods had hoped for, and yet something was wrong. The sun did not move, it hung motionless in the sky, frozen in its place above the earth, casting its light downward, but failing to journey across the heavens. Time did not pass. Shadows remained fixed. The birds did not migrate. The moon waited patiently for its dance to begin, but the sun stood still like a breath held too long. The gods watched in confusion. They whispered among themselves. "The sacrifice was made," they said. "Why does the sun not travel?" Some argued that Nanahuatzin's transformation had not been complete. Others questioned whether the fifth sun had truly accepted its purpose. But one god, wise and ancient, understood the truth. The sun, though born, lacked the final element, motion, the divine force that gives time its shape, the seasons their rhythm, and the soul its journey. Creation had always required more than fire. It had always demanded sacrifice. One life had been given to bring the sun into being, but to set it in motion, to make it move through the sky, to make the days begin and end, to bring death and rebirth to the world. The gods themselves would have to offer their own blood, their own hearts, their divine essence. It was not enough to create the world from above. Now the gods would have to become part of it. This was the law, older even than the gods themselves. Only through sacrifice does the universe continue. The gods stood in silence, each one feeling the weight of this truth settle on their shoulders like the sky itself. The god of fire, Huehueteotl, stepped forward. Ancient and wise, his face lined with the heat of 1,000 cycles, he pressed a knife of obsidian against his chest and opened his heart. His blood spilled onto the earth, red and smoking, and the sky trembled. Then Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who had once created and destroyed with equal force, gave his own blood. He opened his hands with thorns, offering rivers of crimson to the wind. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, dark and brooding, who had once ruled the first sun and seen it fall, bowed his head and gave his blood in silence, perhaps as penance, perhaps as prophecy. One by one the gods followed. Zypa Totec flayed his skin to renew the world. Tlaloc, the Stormbringer, poured his essence into the clouds. Chalchutlicue, whose tears had once drowned the world, now wept again, not out of sorrow, but out of love. Even the moon, Tecuchistecatl, now diminished but still divine, offered his light. Though he could not match the sun's brilliance, he gave what he could, and the gods accepted it. With each offering, the earth awakened further. The sun pulsed once as if taking its first breath, then again, and then it began to move slowly, majestically. The fifth sun began its sacred journey across the sky, east to west, dawn to dusk. The shadows changed, the light shifted, the great wheel of time began to turn, the calendar of the cosmos clicked into motion, and the world was reborn, not just in form but in rhythm. The people who would later walk this earth would know the sun as their life-giver, but they would not know this secret, that behind its daily rise is the sacrifice of the gods themselves, that their blood still flows in the rivers, their hearts still beat in the trees, their breath still dances on the wind. And from that day forward, a pact was made between the gods and humanity. The gods had offered their essence to move the sun, but it was not enough to sustain it forever. Its journey would require constant renewal, constant reverence. The sun would rise each day only if the world remembered the sacred balance. Only if the people too were willing to sacrifice, not just in blood, but in gratitude, in humility, in ceremony, and in love. And so began the rituals, the offerings, the festivals and prayers, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. For the Aztecs and those before them knew, the sun does not rise because it must, it rises because it is fed. It rises because it is loved. It rises because we, the children of the fifth sun, still remember what the gods gave to set it in motion. And if we ever forget, if we ever grow arrogant or selfish or indifferent, then the sun may stop, time may cease, the heavens may fall. But until that day the sun continues its journey, a golden flame carried on the blood of gods, pulled across the sky by memory and devotion, lighting the path of all who walk upon this world. The fifth sun moved. Across the great canvas of the sky, it journeyed with purpose, blazing a golden trail through time. From the first moment of dawn to the final whisper of twilight, it marked the rhythm of the world, giving shape to hours, seasons, and lifetimes. Its path was steady, sacred, and deeply woven into the very structure of reality. This was the sun created through humility, sustained by sacrifice and destined to illuminate the age of humanity. This is the age we live in now. According to the Aztecs, we are the people of the fifth sun, born into a world created not once but many times, layered with memory and myth. The earth beneath our feet holds the bones of giants, the dust of monkeys, the ash of firestorms, and the salt of floods. We inherit not only the land, but the legacy of those worlds that came before, their triumphs, their mistakes, their endings. In this age, time itself is sacred. The Aztecs measured it with precision and awe. Their calendars were not merely tools for agriculture or ritual. They were cosmic maps, mirrors of divine order. Each day was ruled by a different god, each moment humming with meaning. The Tunalpahuali, the sacred Tupati-day calendar, and the Xiupahuali, the solar 3-5-day calendar, intertwined like twins and serpents, guiding everything from battles and births to sacrifices and celebrations. The people believed that the fifth sun, like all the suns before it, was not immortal. It too would come to an end. Its destruction, they believed, would not come by jaguar, wind, fire, or flood, but by earthquake. Tremors would rise from the deep bones of the earth, shaking mountains, crumbling temples, swallowing lakes and cities whole. The ground itself would reject the balance of the world. Time would unravel, the sky would collapse, the sun would fall, and everything would be returned to darkness once more. But until that day, the fifth sun watches over us. Its light touches every living thing, warming crops, guiding travellers, drawing water from the sea, stirring the blood in our veins. We live in a world sustained by a pact between mortals and gods, a covenant of remembrance. To forget is dangerous. The Aztecs believed that if humans fail to honour the sun through ritual, gratitude, sacrifice and awe, its fire would begin to fade. The world would grow cold, time would slow, and eventually the sky would grow silent. So they offered the sun their most precious gift, life. Through ceremony and sacrifice, both symbolic and literal, they fed the sun, kept it alive, and renewed the sacred energy that sustained the cosmos. Their pyramids, aligned with celestial movements, served as stairways between heaven and earth, connecting the divine and the human in acts of devotion. To them, every sunrise was a miracle, a proof that the gods had not yet given up, a sign that the fire still burned, that the balance still held, that the world still turned. And yet, even within this reverence, there was an understanding deeper still, that the gods who created this world were not distant rulers, but beings who had bled for it. They had offered their hearts so that we might live. They had given their light so that we might walk, plant, build, and dream. The fifth world, then, is not just a place, it is a sacred trust. It is the age of the human spirit, fragile, brave, and capable of great beauty. It is an age of light born from darkness, of meaning born from memory. And though the Aztecs are gone, though their cities have crumbled, and their temples have faded into stone and silence, their vision remains etched into the bones of the world. The sun still rises, the moon still follows, and above all the rabbit still sits quietly in the moon's soft glow, reminding us of humility, of sacrifice, and of the story we live within. To the sky at dawn, and you may see it not just as light, but as legacy. The fifth sun burns on, but its flame depends on us, not to be gods, but to be grateful, to remember that even light must be earned, and that every morning is not simply a beginning, it is a gift.